So I have been really bold and made my entire presentation about the Matrix. So how many people have seen the Matrix, the film The Matrix? Okay, about half. So if everyone else, you can leave. Future of strategy and the Matrix. So the reason why this is basically here was I was having a chat with some of my mates last week, and I can't remember how we got onto it, but basically next year the Matrix is going to be 20 years old, which is mind-blowing because for a long time it was always my point of this is what the future is like. And so I then went back after that conversation and rewatched the trilogy, and it's aged terribly, apart from the first one. But The Matrix was actually one of the big reasons why I got interested in comms and creativity. Because if you're a geek like me and into The Matrix, then actually it was one of the first film franchises which really created a universe, which created a whole world, which did a bit of transmedia marketing. So there was obviously the first film, which was fantastic, and then the second two, which were a bit rubbish. But then in between those two, they basically went, wow, look at this incredible world that the Wachowskis have created. And there's some amazing other bits that if you're a Matrix fan, I'd really recommend. So if you haven't seen the Animatrix is fantastic. It's 9 short stories from animators from all around the world, which tell different offshoots, all from the original film, from different characters. There's a great graphic novel series. There's the best video game integration I've ever seen of a film, which is from a scene in the second film. You see 2 characters running away from an exploding building in the film. The game, Enter the Matrix, is a 15-hour game all about those 2 characters and what they went off and did about the film. It's absolutely brilliant. The Path of Neo is absolute shit and incomparable to that. And then the best, worst thing of them all, which is well ahead of its time, is The Matrix Online, which basically promised itself to be the film, where you can just plug in, and it's a bit like Second Life. It's actually really what Grand Theft Auto has become, but it was well ahead of its time. Anyway, the question. Matrix animation. The question that comes out of the report of the future of strategy actually is really similar to a scene from the film, which is where Trinity says, Neo says to Trinity, "What is the Matrix?" Trinity says, "The answer is out there, Neo. It's looking for you, and it will find you. And if you want it to." And this is how I really felt. I really empathised with Neo in trying to interpret, 550 planners' point of view of the future. But actually, all the answers are in the Matrix, because I think as planners, we all look a lot like Neo of how we can try and understand the reality that's around us. We all think our clients are a bit like Agent Smith and out to destroy us. We've all got that planning teacher that we've had who's trying to show us the way, that it's the old guy, it's the old woman in the department who you go, "Didn't you work on Coke 20 years ago?" And they tell you how to do it. And now all of a sudden we all have to see data and properly understand data, otherwise we're completely irrelevant, just like Neo. But actually, I think there are some really good reflections and characters that do tie into when I read the report of what I saw, and where increasingly, especially on the management consultant point, the conversations we're having with clients, that I think that is useful, and it also is just a really calming reminder to strategists, because I think that the big question, and this is genuinely incredibly heartfelt, this is the question I nearly ask myself every day when I go to work, is going, I think we've got one of the toughest jobs in advertising. I think that when you look at all of the different roles within advertising, you can be an account man and you can talk to the client, you can move the process along, you can feel like you're getting something done, you can be a creative and bosh out 99 ideas and take them to a review, and it feels like you're contributing. Strategy is so hard to nail down its impact because so many people can do it. Sometimes the client will hand it to you on a plate. Sometimes you'll have a creative director who's very, very strategic. Sometimes, in the best case, you'll have account people who are incredibly strategic. And so all of a sudden, your entire role can be squeezed out of existence. And then you have a bunch of creatives who are just asking why you're in the room at creative reviews. And so I think it's an incredibly insecure role to be in, and it's really, really hard to think about how we can add value. But I think a lot of it is about freeing your mind of that worry and just understanding that you're always going to have that insecurity because it is such a specialised role. It's also such a new role in the whole scheme of things. And ultimately, the main thing a strategist is there for is to try and simplify. It's to try and simplify the problem and to try and simplify the answers. And so there was 4 things that I wrote about in the essay for Walk, and 4 things that I've managed to somehow attach to characters in the Matrix. So if you remember, those of you who watched it, this is the Oracle. And so the Oracle is the guiding compass, is the thing that actually, I think when you look at management consultants today, it's what they've done so well is come in and tell clients and help clients, this is where we think the future is. The danger of us being bogged down in just executional campaign thinking is just telling people what the answer is instead of where the brand should be going, where the business should be going. Just even annual planning seems to have slowly been pushed further and further down. Some of my clients are only planning for next year, this month. And so the more that we can do to be the guiding compass about long-term thinking, but also just crunching down all of the different inputs from whether that is audience thinking, category thinking, to competitor, to just make it really, really simple. You know, we moan and think about the pace of change within our industry, but we don't really think about how that applies to our marketing clients and all of the different things and channels that they now have to deal with. And so much of what we can do is actually just think that if we are there for them, if we are the oracle for them, their guiding compass, which is telling them which way to go out of all of the different ways. And that's the same for creative teams, is that, you know, we work in a creative industry, which means that there are so many different answers and routes. I've never worked on a brief where there is only one answer. And even when you extrapolate that back out to strategy, where there's only one strategy, somebody has to make that call. Sometimes it will be creative directors who go, I want to do this thing. Sometimes it will be clients, but it should be strategists. That's the biggest and best way that we can really, really add value, is to distill and simplify what we think the problem is, and therefore where we think we should be heading. Really, really simple. The second thing I think is this trend that we've seen, which is getting really, really tight and getting really, really executional, which is where there is still a massive role for us. And we shouldn't forget, we shouldn't think that we have to stay up at 30,000 feet and be the amazing. I think it's incredible how our entire planning industry makes heroes out of brand planners, like it's the best, sexiest thing to do, where you just get to constantly reinvent brand purpose and say this is the way, this is the new big brand idea, when increasingly those briefs just aren't coming up anymore. It's much more about getting down in the weeds. And so it works. It works with the guiding compass thought, which is it's an and, not an or. We should be thinking about the future and being the advisor and simplifying what we think the problem is. But we should also then be going, look, I understand how Snapchat works. I can work with this UX strategist over here. I can think about comm strategy over here. Increasingly, it's about thinking about how you can try and set the path, but also then work with lots of other people and translate all of these really, really confusing new media channels that our marketeers probably don't know about. I think it's an amazing thing, an amazing correlation between the adoption of Facebook and the decreasing age of people working in marketing, is that, you know, Facebook has had the same powerful ad tech for the last 10 years pretty much, but it's only now as more young marketeers get into it and are more used to the platform, that they then go and start using it. And so we need more and more strategists to get down into being confident of helping them and telling them how to make each of these different channels work the best. The third one is I came into this my head of strategy role about 6 months ago, and I wrote an introductory blog post about how you read that walk report and it says it's an amazing time to be a strategist because it's this really complicated world and somebody needs to point the way. It's also a terrible time to join advertising because consultancies are trying to eat our lunch, budgets are being cut shorter, we're getting more and more short-term thinking. And what you need in those times is, yes, you need some vision, yes, you need some strategy, but we need people to come in and give people confidence and lift morale of teams, which is why I put that little animation in. And this is, if this is a small character in the Matrix, this is Tank, who drives the Nebuchadnezzar, flies the Nebuchadnezzar maybe, but really his only role in the film is two things. One is to crack jokes, and secondly to be killed. And I think that's got an amazing parallel with strategists, which is if you aren't really adding value, then you need to pull yourself out of the process. But you shouldn't at all, because the way that you can get in with teams is you've also got this most amazing job, more than anyone else, which is exactly as we heard about strategists going off across America. Our job as strategists is to understand culture, to add the most interesting things we can into briefs. And yes, that can be quite dry sometimes about shopper behaviour or habits or how much people are adding to basket or bits like that. But we've also got the entire internet to feed and fuel creativity. And I think that should be more about how we can try and bring everybody back up with a bit of morale. And the last one, because you can't talk about the Matrix without talking about Trinity, is about simplification, which is really what it's all about. It's what I said at the start, which is, the whole point, the whole real added value that I think strategists can ever add is just trying to cut down options. If you think of your role as cutting down options, as about using reductionist logic, we shouldn't do this because X, we shouldn't do this because X, we shouldn't do this because X, therefore we're left with these three propositions. Sometimes we try and weave an incredibly clever and creative narrative of why the answer is right instead of why these answers are wrong. And the more we can try and simplify and figure out how we can simplify the problems and then what the solutions can be, is where we're really going to add value. And that's where, again, an amazing Trinity quote where she says, right at the very end in the hallway scene, the famous hallway scene where Neo just starts to really understand the Matrix, says, "Neo, I'm not afraid anymore. The Oracle told me that I'd fall in love, and that man, the man I loved, would be the one. So you see, you can't be dead. You can't be, because I love you. You hear me? I love you. Now get up." And that's where there's an entire alternative take on the Matrix, which is it's a love story. It's not a science fiction film. It's actually all about Trinity and Neo finding each other and love being the answer to the world. I prefer it where it's all about bullet time and shooting the shit out of people. but that is a fantastic simplification of an amazing film. And I think this is the thing. This is my final parting bit on it, which is we should really be proud and get confidence in being able to be the guiding compass, to translate, to lift morale, to simplify everything that we're doing. But sometimes I think we try and do this. Sometimes as strategists we try and be too clever. We try and stop the bullets. And that really isn't the answer. In this narrative we are not Neo. The client is always Neo. Our role is always to make our client feel that they have got the answer, that they have come up with it, because ultimately they're the ones who are going to go and sell it to their boss internally. They're the ones who are going to go and be interviewed about what a brilliant brand idea it was, what brilliant stewardship it was. That's where I think strategists can really add value, is think of ourselves not about being concerned about, look at all these consultants who are going to come and eat our lunch. It's actually about how we can be consultants directly to clients, how we can be the right-hand person for them. And then we get this amazing other job, which is we get to work in a creative agency and inspire loads of creative and work with all these different people. But never try and overthink it, because you don't get to be these people. You actually get to be the directors, which is, throughout it all, is you get to actually construct what it is. Strategists, again, are really, if you think that account people basically just send emails a lot of the time, strategists are the ones who get to figure out what the problem is, how the answer should work, how the work should work, and then what it should be and how we're going to measure success. Creatives don't get that role. Strategists are the real directors of the entire marketing problem, and that's where we should be thinking of it. And you may get to hug Keanu at the end of it. That's it. Thank you.